we're going to get into the main event, blockchain and Web3 explained, building blocks of the digital future. I was very fortunate to meet Megan Murray through a different alliance that we're both part of, the Austin AI Alliance, and found out that she is an expert in these topics. And this was great to me because I haven't scheduled them in a while, and it's the area that we cover that I probably know the very least about. So I'm very excited to bring up Megan Murray, the founder of Lea Luna Finance Collective, and two colleagues that she has enlisted to help with today's presentation, Michael Jelen, the CEO of Replay, and Sam Padilla, co-founder and head of product for Iden AI. They're going to talk collectively together through their presentation, so please give all three of them a round of applause.
How's everybody doing? Woo! Happy Thursday. Thanks for coming out. I know it's hard to get motivated this dark, this early. So thanks for coming out and, just spending time with us to learn hopefully some new things, maybe just having an open mind or maybe just reinforcing things you already know. So I'm Megan Murray. I'm the founder of Lea Luna Finance Collective. I've got two colleagues here today with me, as Jay was saying as well. And we're here really to cover blockchain and Web3, what we're referring to as the building blocks of the digital future. So I want to take it back to if you were listening to Jay's opening comments about technology and how it's not just one technology that brings things together. I feel the exact same way. It's not blockchain independently, it's not AI independently that are going to transform our digital future. It's all these things pieced together into something that we don't even know yet because it doesn't exist today. So we're going to take that concept and hopefully break it down for you into some really digestible and understandable pieces. And if at any point we're not digestible or understandable, then feel free to raise your hand and just ask to clarify. So, so with that, we'll just jump right in. Got our photos already. So we could talk about anything tonight. Really, that's the power of blockchain, is to transform so many different areas, like literally every area that we know today from a technology perspective, and those that we have yet to even understand. So, but we're really going to spend some time talking about three specific areas today, just to keep it a little bit more light and fun, but we're going to spend some time specifically talking about community, identity, and data. And the reason why is because these are things that we all know, right? You don't need to know anything about blockchain to know what a community is or what identity or data are. So thought that was a good place to start. How's that sound for everybody? Cool. Awesome. So before we get anywhere, I just thought, let's start with super, super basics. What is Web3? Who's got any idea? Who knows something about Web3? Okay. Just a couple. Cool. So we've got a lot of people here that are just curious. I love that. So I find that the best way to talk about Web3 and to explain Web3 is to talk about, well, what is Web 2 and Web 1? Because when I first heard about Web 3, that was my first question. It's like, well, the internet's the internet. What do you mean? So, but there's different levels of it. And this is a very important part to understand, that none of these really replace anything. They build on what's already there in order to make it faster, more efficient, more transparent, hopefully more accessible too. So if we take it back to the very beginning of the internet, that's what we call Web 1. This was all about just establishing connectivity. So let's take through an example of like someone name a business.
The Yellow Pages.
The Yellow Pages. Okay, I love it. Yeah. So let's go with the Yellow Pages. Thank you, Michael. So Yellow Pages, right? We all know the book, right? So that's what like existed before the internet. It probably still exists today. Every now and then I swear I get one and I send it straight to the recycling. But so anyway, to put that in Web 1 context, you're putting information somewhere. So let's say the yellow book all of a sudden is like the yellow book online. Well, we kind of do that today, right? You actually have to call your haircut salon and schedule an appointment, pull up Google, or go to their website, looking at their hours, like that still exists. So that's really just Web 1 is just accessing, publishing, and just read-only information. Web 2 is like, okay, so let's go with the hair salon then. So, my hair salon now has an Instagram or a TikTok. And so social media to me is like the best example of Web 2. And we really see this come about with participation. So not only can I read the content, but I can interact with it, I can comment on it, I can engage with it in different ways. And then, so to me, that's like the perfect example. And then Web3 is like this different philosophy of transparency and ownership, but also verification and doing this in a technical way that we'll get into a lot more. But yeah, so just starting there with like these things all build on each other. They don't replace anything. We still use all these pieces today. Web3 is just a way that the technology is designed to execute on what it's programmed to do. So again, none of these are replacing anything at the moment. They're just building on each other. So do you guys have anything to add just on Web3 101?
And I guess another way to think of the Web 2 evolution was when social media was probably one of the larger Web 2 components, because at that point, people were creating their own content, whether that's a photo you take and upload to Instagram or a video that you put on YouTube. You now become part of this creative, interactive community of people. Yeah, I think that's right.
Cool. Okay. We're still awake. Awesome. Oh, good question. E-com? What would we consider e-com? Kind of somewhere in between, I think. Yeah, two. I mean,
GeoCities?
what was it? Oh, GeoCities. Okay.
I think that's probably the beginning of Web 2, because you're creating content, including like little blogs or things that you're posting on your own website, or you're updating things on your own GeoCities. So that's the point at which you become a creator. Yeah, so I guess Web 1, the way I would think of it is you're reading, right? And then 2 is the read write. So like you are now able to start to create yourself without a ton of technical capabilities. And then 3 is the read, write, own. So at this point now you can have assets on the internet. And I guess we'll get into what that means, but really trying to connect money or assets or things that you can own with the experience that we have online.
Cool. So we'll go through our first topic today, on-chain communities. So this is literally just a new way to organize. All of us in here are part of so many different communities. If you're here at this AF event, you're part of the Austin Forum community, at least tonight, right? But you're also, part of neighborhoods and other organizations. Maybe you have a job and you have different positions within that company. So like communities are just something we've been doing this forever. We've been organizing forever. Doing so in a digital way is just taking a lot of that online. So much more of what we do, literally, like every year, it's like more and more stuff is online. Things that haven't been online for ever are now like on the internet. And the communities are just a different part of that. So talk through a couple different ways that we're using blockchain to create communities. I'll talk about one way, probably the most like Web3 way to explain this. You might hear the term DAO. It stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. So this is a community. That's really what it is. And if you break down each of those words, like, oh, what is a DAO? I don't know what that is. It sounds really complicated. It's not. So decentralized really literally just means there's not one central authority. There's not one person, one CEO, one board of directors calling the shots. It's really empowered by the participation of the community. Autonomous means independent, right? It has the free will to go about whatever it is that that community is doing, you know, maybe around like some parameters, of course. And then organization, it's a collective, it's a group of people. And what holds this entire thing together is a common purpose, it's a common mission. If you have any group of anything together, if there's no purpose or no mission, fizzles out, right? Like we've seen this happen. Things don't work unless there's a common goal, common thread, unless there's literally a purpose. So you'll hear a lot like about DAOs and how they get iterated on, but it's literally that simple. And then you have this organization, it's up to that organization to figure out how to govern. Maybe they do elect leaders and maybe there's seasons to that every year or so. It's literally up to the community. There's no default. So so we'll spend a little bit of time talking about DAO because they're really synonymous with on-chain organizations. So how do DAOs work? Okay, so if they're on-chain, that means they're online on blockchain. And so using blockchain to do all these things, governance. So the community has established how it's going to operate. The community has established what they're going to do, what the common purpose is. And then they use blockchain technology to really record voting if they have to, you know, put anything forward. And well, to talk a little bit, we've got a real life example, but I want to talk more broadly just to explain it more too. So, and then the ownership. So how do I know that this person is part of this DAO? Because if it's all online, maybe we don't know everybody firsthand like we do here because we can see each other, we can put faces to names. You can't always do that online. Well, with NFTs or non-fungible tokens, are basically a digital way to verify that a person has access to that community. So it's different than having like a username and password and logging into something, right? It's having an actual credential that's in your digital possession that only allows you to access that thing. Actually, with Web3 tools, like there's oftentimes not a username and password because the token validates you instead of the username password. So just a different way to do something we already do. And so smart contracts, these are systematic technical ways to enable that voting, to record that governance, to do it on chain, and to even do so in a way that makes sure that it's compatible or related to the terms that that organization has said that they would govern by. So just high level on DAOs, and this looks like a lot. I'm not going to talk about all of these, but the point I want to make is there's so many different examples of DAOs. And if you go through this list, like you can probably just even yourself think of different communities that do the exact same thing. Like investment and venture DAOs, I mean, that's angel networks. How many people have heard of angel networks? So again, this is just using new technology to do this in a more secure, efficient way where you can, because the community has that common purpose, you don't necessarily need all of the, other in real life verification in order to do a lot of the same things that we do in real life. So today I really just want to talk about like social DAO. So I've got an example I can take you through of a social DAO. And then a little bit later, we'll talk about customer loyalty. I mean, who's in a customer loyalty program? I'm a big Marriott girl. I love my points. I love getting free nights. And so similar things that we already know today, I think loyalty programs are a great example of that because it's very relatable. You do this, you spend these dollars, you get these points, you can do this thing. So DAO is doing the exact same thing, but systematically done online using blockchain. So, okay, so now some fun stuff. So ATX DAO, both Sam and Michael and I, all three of us, are part of ATX DAO, Austin, Texas. So this was a group of people that in 2021, my years are all messed up after COVID. So yeah, so 2021, group of people came together and just decided, let's just make a DAO for Austin, Texas, just a community of people who want to get together and support the local community and do things to drive innovation, to support local artists, to, just engage with the community. And being based in Texas, having the proximity to the state capital, working with legislation or legislative officials, policymakers, to understand what the heck this thing is and how it can go about being regulated. So, so actually, both Sam and myself were involved in different ways, like with legislatures, and that was a pretty interesting experience. And but so anyway.
District. Yeah, so the ATX, I'm actually thinking, I actually think it was 22. It's been in all cases, it's been a long time. The DAO has been around for a while. But I think the way that we usually present the DAO is we do three main things. And the Austin City DAO has been focused on three main things. Making Austin a better city via blockchain, via crypto, via Web3. And this transpires in three main ways. One was just fostering innovation and educating businesses and local artists about Web3. The other one, which is community, just getting people together to talk about crypto, share ideas, share experiences, build some of that like networking synergy in Austin for Web3. And the third one was policy. So educating policymakers about blockchain technology, crypto, and so on. And then what Megan was given as an example is during the last legislative session in 23, we went through the process of trying to pass a law in the state of Texas to get DAOs recognized as legal entities in a new legal entity framework in the state of Texas. So we testified in front of the Texas Senate a couple times, in a couple of work groups as well. We were able to actually get through the House. We ran out of time to go through the Senate, but it just goes to show, I mean, that's just one example of the policy engagement that we had. But on top of that, we also walked through a lot of events, social events. A lot of people found new opportunities, new work opportunities via connections in the DAO. We did a lot of artist-oriented stuff. So the mural that you guys are seeing is one of the first murals that I actually think was the first mural in the city of Austin that was painted and transformed into an NFT. And the artist got royalties for all the NFTs that got minted after the mural was painted. We also organized pitch competitions to foster innovation in the city of Austin as well, and get people to give them like the first small investment to go and create new companies and continue to expand the technology in Texas, but globally as well. So overall, just a lot of actions and a lot of activities in multiple domains, all coming from the same principles of nobody really leads this, is an organic organization that leadership is very fluid, and the assets are tracked on chain, and it's just a community of friends that organize behind a given cause, and the cause has been and is to make Austin a better city via crypto. And we actually achieved a lot in this last 2 to 3 years that the DAO has been in existence.
And I've literally given hundreds of thousands of dollars back to the local economy when we have a party or something that's usually attached, like a big event like South by, hiring local artists. And, so really all of this is driving sponsored funds back into the community, all brought together and empowered by the DAO. And actually, I'm glad you brought up the DAO bill. So even though, as Sam was explaining, we got into the legislative process and then it kind of died on the vine at the end just because of time. Well, that exact same framework got picked up and passed in Wyoming in April of this year. So like, that's pretty cool. That just shows you that like we were the first decentralized body of anything to get something passed through a major organization. Like that wasn't part of the mission or charter when the whole thing started, but it is a fact of where it ended up. So, and then
one super quick thing to add too on the policy side. During the last, I mean, the presidential election that just wrapped up, crypto was a massive point of policy and debate, and a lot of the work that was started locally in Texas, and a lot of the people that were involved in some of those early policy work, kind of like a lot of those ideals graduated, if you may, to go to DC, and particularly one person comes to mind, one of the co-founders of the DAO, Mason. He led and continues to lead a lot of that community work with some of the largest national organizations that defend crypto from a policy perspective. So the work that is started locally kind of like grew to become a national matter. And it's really cool to see that it all started with very grassroots communities just who came together behind the same cause of like, this is a good technology. Let's show to the world and let's show to policymakers that this is a good, beneficial technology for our communities and for the country in general.
Yeah, and so we're also in January doing our third annual pitch competition. So it's been great turnout the past couple of years. Actually, applications are still open until November 17th. If you're a founder in AI, Web3, FinTech, we'd love to have you apply. And we're literally giving away $10,000 to the winner. And it's not really about the winning. It's the awesome networking. People have gone to their pitch competitions and have walked away with investors. They've walked away with business contacts, with people who've turned into employees. I mean, it's just a great networking event, and it'll actually be at the ACC Highland campus January 25th. So that's really our next big thing coming up. And just to show you, like, we're just 3 out of 240 people or so. They're doing this in Austin. Well, this has kind of caught on literally across the globe. So what you're seeing here is a map that we've tracked of all of the on-chain city DAOs that are using blockchain to organize and to govern, and who are doing this across like every continent and really all over the place. I think there's over 40. If you go to citydao.network, that's something that we put together just to track everything. And it's been amazing how many people have reached out and just said, hey, like, hey, I'm in Boston and I love what you guys are doing in Austin. And then they pop up Boston DAO and it's all like Dunkin' Donuts themed and very like niche to their local area. And just there's so many stories like that all over the globe. So just goes to show you from a grassroots perspective how the impact we make in our local communities really can make a difference, and it can bubble up and other people do notice. And if you're doing something cool, people like usually want to copy it. So it's really just flattering to see the work we've been doing hasn't been for nothing, and that people do notice and that they're using it just to really connect in their communities and using digital technology to do that. Speaking of digital.
Yeah, so Megan did a great job introducing a bunch of different possible ways that blockchain technology can be used. And one that is really quite popular right now that people are talking about is how do we bring our identity on chain or to the internet, to a place that's typically been anonymous for so long. And NFTs, a bunch of different credentialing organizations are looking in ways to do that. But let's take a look at some examples that we can talk about here. So I know it's kind of small, but in the upper corner here, we have a bunch of different use cases that are being evaluated for digital identity. And that could mean anything. In some cases, cities and states are bringing the driver's license on chain. And some of the benefits of this, you'd say, well, why does my driver's license need to be on chain? There are a lot of different reasons. One, if you're trying to fill out government forms and you want to be able to verify that. But another is also to hide certain kinds of information from people that don't need it. So let's take the example of going to a bar. When you go to a bar and you flash your ID, that person gets your home address, which is totally irrelevant as to whether or not you're able to order alcohol at that bar. And these sort of situations can be handled programmatically in verifying who you are, maybe where you live, or other different reasons that you may be in that online community. Similarly, you also have things like education, which is a very, very big one. Obviously, the number of people who lie about their educational background is extremely high as a form of fraud. And so universities, many of them, as well as newer online learning studios like Coursera or Udemy, are looking into ways where they can take all of their credentials and put them directly on the blockchain. So when you go to someone's LinkedIn page, you could simply see that credential, click on it, and verify that, yes, that person did study machine learning or whatever it is that they say that they're studying. So you can see that this is something that people can accumulate over the course of their lifetime and build up an entire portfolio of things that they've done or learned. The same applies for supply chain management, healthcare. There are a ton of different use cases where the identity of either a person or let's just say like a farmer's market would want to verify who or what produced this specific good. These sort of things can be easily verified with a barcode scan to validate that that is in fact from where they said it was. So lots of possibilities here, and it's a huge world that we'll get into. As Megan mentioned earlier, the idea of building a community around these credentials is also very important. And so there are two main ways we can take a look at this. One would be credentials that can be transferred between individuals and others that can stay specifically with an individual. So in the example of ATX DAO, the organization we spoke about earlier, we actually verify that someone is a member based on an NFT. So a piece of artwork that is very unique and signed to that individual. We all mint our own when we join that organization, but they can actually be transferred. So in the event that someone was moving out of Austin to another city, they would be able to sell that to someone else. And that's essentially transferring ownership in that community, which includes governance rights, the ability to vote on certain things, to another individual. And so the pictures that I included here on the right side are a project that many of you may have heard of, even outside of the typical crypto world, called Bored Ape Yacht Club. I know a bunch of celebrities bought these during the last hype cycle, but that would grant you the ability to go to some of these parties in real life, or even a music festival that they throw. And so you can, of course, buy and sell these. It's a marketplace for what this membership costs, and it's something that gives you real-world benefits. There are actually other downstream benefits of programs like this, where you can take the artwork and get it printed on t-shirts, shoes, different kinds of things, because you own that IP. And so it would be associated to you. You have the right to use it. And if other people use it, you can license it for revenue. Yeah, so I think at a high level, that sort of covers those two. I'll talk a little bit about the company that I'm working with because we are now getting into this loyalty and reward space. So at a high level, Replay and Rewarded TV, which is our application, it's a Web 2.5 application, which sort of means that it's accessible through traditional rails. In this case, an app you could download on iOS, Android, Roku, Fire TV, Apple TV, something like that. But the backend infrastructure utilizes the blockchain. So most customers don't even know that they're using the blockchain to engage with this product, which is really great and easy for adoption. So the problem that we wanted to solve at the very beginning was creators who are streaming through Netflix or YouTube don't have a lot of visibility into who's watching their content. So Netflix, for instance, every quarter will just tell you how many seconds that your content was streamed. Not even how many people have streamed it, where you rank, or where those people live, but just the number of seconds. And so we wanted to create a platform for streaming that was way more friendly to artists and also would pay them in a faster, quicker, more reliable manner. And so we set up a video tracking protocol so that as you watch a video, every 10 seconds, there's a pixel that goes through your TV, and then that records on the blockchain that, yes, this person has indeed watched this video, which then would release a payment to the creator so that they're getting paid. And this is all ad supported, so it's ad money that then flows through the creator. Well, as we started to do this, we realized that there has to be an incentive for people to come leave Netflix or leave some of these other platforms to come to us. And so the idea of creating a reward program that was watch to earn came up as a very early idea. So at that point, if you're watching any of this content, we're actually paying you. So kind of you're earning these points, which are tokenized, for every hour that you're consuming on the platform. Well, this is really great, but it would actually be even better if we could layer on loyalty from each of the individual creators. So let's say that you have a cooking show on YouTube. You don't really know everything about all of your customers, but it would be great for you to engage with them in more detail. So now, if your cooking show is being streamed, in addition to getting our token or our reward points, you're also getting reward points from Megan's cooking show. And so you're accumulating these reward points. You can gamify engagement with that person. So you could have questions that are popping up live during your cooking show. Hey, throw me out a new ingredient that would be great to throw in this dish. Or, hey, pop quiz, 2 weeks ago, I had my grandmother on and we cooked something else. What was it? And so you can start to incentivize engagement and talk to your community in a completely different way that creates a stickier interaction and has them spend more time and energy on your platform, which drives more ad dollars. So it's kind of like a marketing investment that they can think of. The next natural path from that would then be this community that supports you, that is building you up. You could then take it a step further and raise funds from them. So if Megan wanted to go to Italy and do a gelato cooking show, but needed $10,000 to do it, now she has the mechanism to interact directly with the audience that she's built and be able to monetize that audience for things that she wants. The natural progression after that is, of course, gating certain kinds of content. So as you're accumulating these points, it could unlock special features, behind the scenes footage, or perhaps you only want to allow certain kinds of content to be viewed by certain people. One example that we actually are doing right now, there's a documentary that's been winning a lot of awards lately. It's a very tragic story, a lot of home video about bipolar disorder in a family. It's called Spiral with a Y. And the creators really struggled to get distribution on major platforms. It's very difficult to be able to negotiate with Netflix or Amazon. And they've also partnered with a charity to be able to provide mental health services to anyone who sees this film, because often it triggers some sort of mental event that reminds you that you should talk to someone, or perhaps someone in your family would be good to talk to. So what we're able to do is create a call to action within the entire ecosystem of watching this. So if someone goes and donates, that donation will unlock this content. So a certain portion of that will flood to the charity. But then after that and during that, we can have a live chat that has people from BetterHelp or other different kinds of mental health organizations there to help people ask questions, and even have the creator in there for any sort of questions as well. So you see how this is a much more interactive process. The tokenization that makes all of this possible really is akin to, in Megan's example earlier of Marriott, getting Marriott points for staying at a Marriott, but then those points also unlock the future revenue of Marriott. So this is a way of decentralizing and creating the ownership of this entire platform as something that's accessible to the entire community. Yeah, I think we talked about a couple of these, but like the crowdfunding is really a huge element of what creators are trying to do. So we were able to create content that otherwise wouldn't be created. And the first of those was called Psycho KO. So it's a comic book that existed. There was a fan base for that comic book. And then the cast of Napoleon Dynamite were very excited about turning this into something. So in order to get the revenue for, or in order to get the money to fund that, they actually sold NFTs to the community, raised about $80,000. And through that process, we're able to pay an animator to create an animated TV series. And at first, the only people who could get that were the ones who had invested in it. Of course, the natural stage after that is now, like we said, read, write, own in Web3, passing on future revenue for these assets to anyone who contributed to that. So right now, it's almost impossible to invest in film as an individual. Usually it's a very restricted asset class. It's hard to get into. But this opens up the door wide for people, directors, even independent small creators to now have accessibility of creating content that wasn't otherwise possible.
Can I just make a quick comment here? Generally, the possibility to invest in new asset classes that have been locked away for the retail investors so far is one of the biggest benefits of Web3. From film to generally real estate, the idea or the thesis to fractionalize, or even private markets, like you can invest in a private company without waiting for the company to go public by investing in their token, for example. There's some murky stuff there legally, but beyond the point, just generally to be able to access different asset classes is such a big democratizer of wealth, because right now, I mean, the accredited investor laws basically build a massive wealth gap where only people who are accredited investors have access to some of the assets that usually outperform the rest of the market, and then the rest of the retail investors only have access to the same small subset of assets that yield maybe in a good year 10%. So this is so powerful. And if you take anything from this conversation, one of the biggest transformative aspects of this technology is democratizing access to investment opportunities and asset classes. It's very transformative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another asset class that really hasn't been brought to the forefront is our data. And this comes into the play of our identity as well. So whenever you go on Google and you're searching for things, or you go on YouTube and you watch things, or Spotify and listen to things, all of those are data that is unique to you, and it's creating your identity. And right now, all of that data is owned by the current large companies like Facebook, Google, Spotify, YouTube, all of this. And until today, that hasn't been monetizable. So there are blockchain programs. There's a platform called Camp that is linking Web2 data into the Web3 ecosystem. The reason for that is that if you try to create a social brand right now, you are fighting against Google and Facebook, who have everything, and it's akin to basically competing against a chef who has access to every ingredient in the whole world with like $25, you can go to a gas station, right? So it's very, very challenging. But by bringing this information on chain, a user like you or me could go on, we could link our YouTube account, our Spotify account, and then that data becomes monetizable. So we can actually get paid for anyone who uses this data. I don't know what they're going to use it for. They could train AI models on it. They could cross-market on it. Doesn't really matter. We would get compensated for it. And then that allows other providers to be able to tap into this data source and market in a slightly different way. So going back to the cooking example that we had before, this means that a creator on our platform would be able to look at who's watched a lot of YouTube videos that are related to cooking and target that community with bonus reward points. And also, group people, cluster people into profiles based on what they've seen, what they've consumed. Really an interesting way to look at our identity as our footprint of the things that we consume, but certainly an area that is growing very, very rapidly.
And it's fascinating too when you think about things like GDPR and the California Privacy Act, where the usually technology leads regulation. And now I feel like with things that are happening in the EU, there's a lot more, awareness of like, no, I'm the customer, I own my data. Like, why does Google get to own my data and then sell me ads and get paid for that? So I think this is like one of the rare times where some regulation in some pieces of this is actually ahead. And one of those is on the data element too. So, I mean, I think I own my identity because I'm the person, but that's just me.
Yeah, it really, yeah, that's an element of the read, write, own that I think we hadn't thought about when we first got into this industry, but like the ownership of your own data and bringing the right back to you is a huge power to the people that I think is excellent for this community.
I just wanted to click on Okay, I had doubts about my mic, so I wanted to switch it up. But okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit more about decentralized AI. It is in a way I'm gonna segue to talk directly about this data piece that we touch base on that both Megan and Michael mentioned. But I'm gonna talk more broadly about this new category of Web3 called decentralized AI. Just by a show of hands here, who has heard the term decentralized AI before? Oh, wow, that's actually a surprising amount of people. That's good. Great. Okay, so let's dive a little deeper into this. So I'm gonna go over a few things here. I'm gonna talk about what is decentralized AI and why it matters. I'm gonna talk about the main areas of decentralized AI, some of the AI scaling limitations, and why decentralized AI may actually be the solution, and decentralized AI data or decentralized data overall, and the path to mass adoption of Web3 in general. But let's begin with and sorry, just for some context. Also, this is directly what we're working on at Adon, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more at the end about what we're doing at Adon as well. So, at a very, very, very high level, how is an AI, like a large language model, made today? You just grab a ton of data, you grab a ton of compute, you put them together, and you hope that kind of like a really good model kind of comes out of the other side of this black box. It's very simple. It's actually very simple. From like a logic standpoint, of course, you need the transformer architecture, you need some basic understanding of machine learning, but the biggest constraint is not necessarily the knowledge. You can go and talk to ChatGPT for 30 minutes and kind of like get a really good sense of what you need technically to build a model. What's really limiting is having the data and having the compute and having the skill of those two to be able to actually build a model that can actually compete with, I mean, any either closed or open source model that are actually close to the cutting edge. And this field is evolving so rapidly that what is state of the art today will not be state of the art in like a month from now. But generally speaking, data compute equal AI. So from here, you can make the inference that, okay, if you control the compute, if you control the data, you basically control AI. And this is exactly why decentralized AI really matters. So I think a lot of us could agree that AI in general is one of the most transformative, impactful technologies in the history of humanity. Arguably, maybe even more important and more transformative than the internet itself. And if this extremely powerful technology is developed and controlled by a handful of individuals and a handful of organizations, society and humanity as a whole is in it for a very dark future. Because if you control the data, you control the compute, and you control the AI, you can basically embed into this super powerful technology whatever philosophy of the world you believe in, doesn't matter what other people believe in, or whatever philosophy of the world you believe in, you will accrue immense amount of power, immense amount of wealth. And the biggest thing is that a lot of this was built not necessarily out of your own merit, but it was built by, I don't want to use the word luring, but luring maybe is fitting in this context, but you lure other people into your platforms with free services or offers of free services when you're just basically collecting a lot of their data and using that data to then create this extremely powerful technology. And when before doing ADON, I was working at Google, and when the transformer paper that kind of like started this entire large language model revolution came out in 2017, but ChatGPT or GPT-3, I guess, is like the biggest large language model that became really famous, came around in 2021. And when that happened, I very quickly freaked out about the direction that society is going down. Because I truly believe deeply to the bottom of my heart that if AI is controlled by a handful of organizations, society is in really, really big trouble. Some examples of some of these shenanigans that are happening with your data that you don't even know about. This happened earlier this year, two very simple multi-million-dollar deals that Reddit struck with Google and that Apple struck with Shutterstock to buy a lot of data. A lot of this data that wasn't really generated or created by Reddit or wasn't really created by Shutterstock, but instead was created by their communities, by their people, by their users of their platform who were lured into those platforms thinking that they were just going to be using a free service. So very clearly, in the internet of today, you don't own your data. And if you don't own your data, the people who are owning your data on your behalf are monetizing it, and not just monetizing it by selling ads to you. That's a Web2 way of monetizing data, if you may. But they're monetizing it by creating extremely powerful technology that in, I don't know, 10, 20 years from now may completely change the way that society functions. And if you have no say and no financial upside on what is getting done with the data that you provided to them, again, we are in it for a really dark future. So I asked myself this question at the beginning of this year. It's like, wow, I'm working at the machine. I was doing a blockchain and Web3 at Google. And I asked myself this question. I was like, wow, is this really the future that I want to work for? Do I really want to feed this machine to go and build a dystopia? And the answer for me was very clearly no. I don't want to do this. This actually matters a lot to me. I want to go and actually try to build a better future for humanity. So where does blockchain come in into this whole thesis of AI? This seems like a bit of a technical slide. It really isn't. It's very straightforward. I think one of the easiest way to think about blockchains in general, very first principle way to think about blockchains is a state transition system. Sounds like a mouthful, but it's, again, very simple concept. More than Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3, I think if you understand that a blockchain is a system that is keeping track of ownership in a decentralized way, you really understand this space much better than the majority of people, even a lot of people who are in the space as well. So what is a state transition system? So imagine at state S, I own 2 apples, you own 0 apples. I send you 1 apple, that's a transaction. And then in the next state, you have 1 apple, I have 1 apple. It's just like a bank transaction. So I have $10, I send you $5. In the next state, in the next stage, you have $5, I have $5. These states are what we call blocks in the blockchain, and the transactions are basically the transactions. When I send you money, when somebody sends me money, or it doesn't have to be just money, it can be virtually anything. So fundamentally, a blockchain is a system that tracks X, whatever that is, apples, money, tokens, NFTs, anything. and tells you at any point in time, you can look at this point in time and have a snapshot of the system at that point in time. That can be today, tomorrow, yesterday, 3 months from now. And then you will know who owns what, or who owns what at that point in time, and what was the chain of events that happened from the beginning of time to get to that point. So let's say in this example of the apples, let's say I have 2 apples at the beginning, I have 2 apples today. I give you 1 apple today, tomorrow you have 1 apple, I have 1 apple. And then you go and send somebody else 1 apple. And then 2 days from now, Megan has 1 apple, you have 0 apples, and I have 1 apple. How do we get to this point? You can actually go back in time and see, oh, the day before I gave you 1 apple, and then you gave that apple to Megan, and so on and so forth. Very, very first principle way to think about blockchains. So where does decentralized AI come in? Decentralized AI comes in by thinking about this way of blockchains, or thinking of blockchains in this way, and saying, oh, what if we apply the same principles that we have been applying so far to financial systems, so tracking basically tokens or NFTs, and you apply that to AI? Can you utilize the same principle of distributed consensus on agreeing on who owns what at any point in time to actually build and own AI? That is the fundamental idea behind decentralized AI. So a couple core areas of decentralized AI. There's multiple aspects of this. All of them follow the same principle of like, oh, can I provide something to this network? This network will track who owns what at any point in time, and then I will monetize this resource that I'm giving to the network. This is like a very messy AI crypto market map. There is decentralized compute, training, AGI, coprocessors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it really comes down to 3 big categories. One is compute. So can you actually, instead of train models in a massive data center with like, I don't know, an incredible amount of compute, can you actually instead plug in together all of the computers that we have on our homes, or maybe the computers that you have on your phone or whatever, and actually network them together in a way that AI training can happen in a decentralized way, as opposed to happening in a massive data center owned by a massive company. That is the core thesis of compute. Agents is basically, now that you have a bunch of open source models or even closed source models, can you actually orchestrate these agents in a decentralized way? So maybe I host one agent, you host the other agent, somebody else hosts another agent, and then the network basically picks or chooses which agent to serve at any point in time. So let's say I come to this network and I say, hey, I want to book a flight. And then the network somehow routes my request to whichever agent exists on the network that is best performing at booking flights, just to give an example. And then data, which is kind of like the space that we're starting on, and what we touch base on here a lot, is can you actually own your own data, contribute your own data to the blockchain, and track what happens to your data, and be compensated for whenever either you sell your data or for whenever your data is used according to whatever rules you want to give. So let's say I want to take a photo of this room and I want to post it and get compensated for selling this data. So whenever I sell the data, I would get 1 cent, 2 cents, whatever. Or maybe I want to share my health data on chain or on the blockchain and let other people see parts of my health data, but I don't want to sell that. I want to keep it, and I want to earn royalties whenever somebody accesses that data. Those ideals of I want to program what happens with my data, and I want a really easy way, an auditable way to track what is happening with my data at any point in time, and then getting compensated for whenever I sell it or use it and so on. So how does this fit into scaling? So for context, scaling is basically the idea of, can we continue to make models better? So if you go back into, I mean, GPT-3 wasn't the first GPT model that OpenAI released. There was GPT-2 before that. I mean, there were some versions that were not called GPT-1, but they were GPT-1 versions. But since 2017 or so, the current paradigm around scaling has been very simple. Around making models better has been very simple. You go back to the original diagram that I gave you, data compute equals AI, and they just say more data, more compute equals better AI. And so far it's working, right? So GPT-2 was better than GPT-1, GPT-3 was better than GPT-2, GPT-4 is better than GPT-3, and so on and so forth. But there's something interesting happening, that is that scaling is starting to tamper out. And there's a lot of really interesting academic papers on this, if anybody wants to dive deeper, or even just blog posts that actually talk about this really well. But basically the core idea is that the scaling curves that we were following before were not linear, were not exponential, but actually are logarithmic and kind of asymptotically reaching some level of, some abstract limitation of scaling. So suddenly adding 2 times more data, 2 times more compute doesn't really equal 2 times better AI. Or even or even adding the same amount of data that took you from generation 1 models to generation 2 models doesn't really equal taking you from the current generation to the next generation. You need more and more compute and more data. But it's also really interesting. This is like a really high level blog post by famous podcaster DP Dorkash Patel, who talks about scaling is a little outdated, but the core thesis is still very valid in the space. But one of the really interesting ideas, and this is kind of the thesis that we have behind ADON, is that one of the main reasons that scaling is there's multiple reasons why scaling isn't really playing out as well. So there's like architectural issues, things, maybe the transformer architecture is not the end all and goal of model architecture and so on. But a very core idea is that we're actually running out of data to train models on. Current models, we go back to this, the more data has basically just been more web data, more internet data, more Reddit posts. And that's why you had this massive multi-million-dollar deals, because actually, at the beginning of this year, having access to all of Reddit's posts was actually extremely valuable. Not anymore. That's pretty much every model, every state-of-the-art model right now has access to that data or has seen that data in their training set. But generally, the idea or the thesis is that we're running out of data because all of the blog posts, all of the comments, all of the social media posts, all of the tweets, all of the news, all of those have been scraped 1,000,000 times by 1,000,000 different models, by 1,000,000 different organizations. And all of the authors of those blog posts, news articles, or social media posts or comments, none of them saw any value from the value that they generated for other companies. But it's enough. Like that data has been seen 1,000,000 times. So we're getting to a point in which more Reddit posts or more Twitter posts or more blog posts or more news articles are not really cutting it anymore. So we need something new. And that's actually what we're working on at ADON. We're starting with real-world multimodal data. This is what we call frontier data. It's no longer about, oh, I want to go and scrape the web to get access to Twitter. That has already been done 1,000,000 times by 1,000,000 other companies. The only difference is that maybe that data is not really easily accessible. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to take the next step in the scale of AI, which is real-world data. What I mean by real-world is physical data, videos of the real world, photos of the real world, audios of the real world, hand motion information or accelerometer data of how your hands move when you're interacting with the real world. This is the core thesis behind what is needed, our core thesis behind what is needed for the next generation of models. You need data that has not been seen before. You need real world data. You need data about how humans see the world. We want to we are actually building a network that is enabling anybody to teach AI by interacting with their physical world and their environment around them. You just basically take photos, take videos of your daily lives according to some tasks or some guidance that we provide in the app. And then based on that, you own the data that you're providing, and then this data gets then used to train models. And the core thesis is the same, is whenever this data gets used, you will be getting compensated. So just as a general overview of where we're at, we recently raised a $3.5 million round, and we launched our first application this week. So if anybody wants to check it out, feel free to go to our website, adon.ai, and just go to the app and start playing around. Just explore your world. We call it Go on Quest, collect data about the physical world, and teach AI or teach the next generation of AI what is needed to build, to understand the world better, and do it in a way that you continue to own the technology, and do it in a way that the future of AI belongs to us, the people, and not to the big corporations that currently own data and compute.
I just wanted to add one interesting thing that seems to also be happening. It's not necessarily real world related, although I guess it has money and implications for the real world. Where blockchain and AI intersect is becoming extremely interesting because it also offers AI the possibility of playing in the content generation space as a human without anyone noticing any different. So like, I don't know if you guys have noticed something called Notebook LM. It was made by Google, and you can have it create content for you that's extremely public facing and very well produced, like a podcast, for instance. And so you could have this AI create content upload it somewhere, get paid into a wallet address, then use that wallet address and automate the process of marketing that content, adding different people to it, doing whatever, continuing to build out that content, and act as if it is a sovereign individual, which is pretty interesting. And then it can obviously recursively make more money, continue to build itself out. And yeah, this sort of stuff is incredibly powerful. I mean, we're using it right now in terms of ways of tracking intellectual property that's created by AI that was originally created by an individual. So if you were to take characters like that were made in an animated cartoon, train a model on it, and then create derivative content, new scenes or something like that, you can ensure that the original creator is getting compensated. But this takes it to an entirely new world where you could create fully AI generated content, monetize that, and then have that entity end up making money. So yeah, it's really an incredible frontier between these two technologies.
This goes back, interestingly, to what you were mentioning about digital identity. In a world where anybody can have an agent that is performing actions either on the blockchain, online, or maybe in the real world, robots going around and doing tasks on your behalf, it becomes extremely important to prove not just that you belong to a community, but to prove that you're a human. And it sounds simple, but it's an incredibly hard question to solve. How do you prove that you're a human? Is a really important, really important, and really challenging question that we need to solve as we go forward and build kind of like the next generation of AI models. But generally, it's really cool to see that a lot of these technologies, back to what was said at the beginning, a lot of these technologies exist in this really interesting ecosystem when one fits into the other. So we have AI, we have robotics, we have Web3, we have identity, and all of these fit in together to just hopefully build a better future for all of us.
And I know we threw a lot at you there, but yeah, I guess just to wrap it up kind of quickly, and then we can open for Q&A. But it's not just one technology that's going to transform things, and it just comes back to the basics of we're all humans. We're incented to organize. We want to interact with our communities, and we need data to just know what to do with our communities. So we can't get through any of this, whether it's blockchain or AI or quantum or anything, without really clear intentions and purpose, and most importantly, collaboration. So that's my final thought.
Thank you. All right, for our guest question moderator tonight, we have Wyatt Callahan from NFP. Wyatt Callahan, that sounds like a cowboy name, doesn't it? Wyatt Callahan. So Wyatt is from NFP. They're one of our annual partners that make these events possible. Wyatt has been scrolling through the event questions channel tonight and has picked out a few he likes. Wyatt, I'll give you a symbol when it's time to ask the last one, the winning question. So hold that till I give you the sign, okay?
Questions tonight? We're just doing 3, Jay? Okay. All right. So this first one's a bit of a mouthful, but just hang with me here. So as evidenced by the rise of crypto prices since the election, there's a lot of optimism that the regulatory backdrop in the US will become more hospitable. That said, there remains lingering suspicions among many that crypto projects and their associated tokens are just scams. What do the panelists think that policymakers and legislators can do to balance the desire for adequate consumer protections with the industry's goal of greater market access? And what can the industry do to self-police and reduce negative perceptions and encourage trial and adoption?
Great question.
I maybe have a controversial viewpoint on this, so definitely want to be balanced on this one. My personal opinion is that this industry does eventually, not always in everyone's time frame, police itself pretty well. I would think back to the way that even a large bank like UBS or something makes a business decision based on financial statements that are often 3 months old and audited by a firm that might not have its own integrity. So there are just a number of different pieces where this can fail. Maybe time is one of them. By moving everything onto the blockchain, you ultimately do have more and more transparency than the current systems that exist. And the way that I think we can move towards a system that is ultimately creating the confidence that's necessary for people to invest is by having very clear cash flows of how a business immediately takes value and puts that into a token. So for example, we call this tokenomics in the industry, having a flow that every time a user consumes this media or buys this product or does something, that immediately triggers an autonomous purchase of the token or a burn of the token or something where that money, that cash, goes into this token. And then you have confidence and auditable, clear, transparent evidence that that money is going into this ecosystem. The more that we have that in these use cases where we're taking a normal business model and moving it on chain and just replacing money with a token, the clearer and better you can even evaluate these businesses, even real time. I mean, one of the things that was very interesting during the last collapse in the crypto industry was that many of the companies that failed and fell apart, pretty much all of them were traditional in some way, shape, or form, like Celsius. They were all normal businesses. All of the businesses that were fully on chain for decentralized lending, they liquidated a bunch of people because their assets were worth less than the value of the loan, but they continued to operate completely fine. And I think these sort of battled scars that the industry has gone through during periods of extreme shock have really hardened us and made us ready to handle and demonstrate that this is all transparent.
I totally agree. And I think on the heels of that, there was a very important thing that passed here in Texas the last legislative session. It's the proof of reserves and proof of liabilities. This is pretty much what banks are required to disclose to the government. And it's just like, hey, the money I say I have and the amount I owe, you know, obviously I should have more than what I owe, right? That's just kind of basic knowledge. So requiring things like that alone would have prevented the FTX collapse if they were operating in Texas, for example. I think things like that are important, but the most important thing I think is that these two sides just need to get together and talk to each other. And I don't mean the people that have the big lobby dollars who are paying to be sitting with a senator who's being paid to be seen with them. I don't mean that. I mean like legitimate, hey, we want the US to continue to be a hub for innovation. We want the US to continue to be a leader because guess what? Otherwise, these companies are just going elsewhere. They already have been going elsewhere. So if we want to stay ahead in this, knowing that blockchain is just one piece of this digital future, then people just need to talk to each other. It's as simple as that.
100% agree.
Saving the winner for last. Okay. All right, so looking ahead to 2025, what specific use case or application of blockchain technology are each of you most excited about?
AI. Yeah, I actually like just to elaborate. I really think that decentralized AI is very, very important. If it didn't, if it wasn't clear from my presentation, but yeah, and I'm very excited to see all of the great things that a lot of people building in the space are gonna create.
I'm excited to see the overlap. I think that blockchain and AI together can balance out a lot of each other's downfalls, like a lot of good relationships should, right? And it's like blockchain has this transparency layer and that freaks people out. Well, AI has this like can do so many tasks so fast and that freaks people out. But if you can using digital identity and things that you can verify the accuracy of data or the identity of a person, then you can kind of counterbalance all of those negative things. But that's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, similar to Sam, I would say the thing that I'm working on as well, creators and the ability for creators to take back ownership. You know, a lot of us, I think, entered this industry or chose to work here because we believe in the power of the underdog and upsetting the current power structures that exist. And when I look at a lot of Web 2, it's highly concentrated into a handful of large companies. And this technology now, for the first time, gives us the ability to put that back into the hands of audiences and creators that that they support. And in this situation, I think we can have follow on the trend of like solopreneurship, where a single individual using a lot of AI tools and the power of automation through the blockchain is able to create their own business, create their own content, create their own art, and handle every element of that all by themselves. So yeah, creators.
So in decentralized AI, where the community controls the data and computational resources, how can we prevent limitations in computing power from leading to inaccurate or unreliable AI outputs?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great question, and it's one of the biggest reasons why, out of all the areas that I showed in decentralized AI, compute is compute is perhaps the one that I'm least excited about, particularly because the current way that AI models get trained need a lot of compute, and just decentralizing compute doesn't really give you access to anything new. It just maybe builds a more transparent system. Maybe it lets other people participate in the system, but doesn't really unlock anything that is currently not possible via some massive data center controlled by Google or Facebook or any of these guys. So generally speaking, I think unless something really changes with the way that AI models get trained, and somehow the bandwidth requirements significantly decrease and the requirements for compute overall significantly decrease when training models, I don't really see a lot of really interesting things happening in the compute space. What I'm really excited about, though, when I say compute, I guess compute for training models. What I'm really excited about is inference on the edge device. Imagine, for example, you have a powerful enough phone that you can actually run a model in your phone without the information that you're interacting with on the model ever leaving your device. Imagine, for example, I mean, the Apple Intelligence is a really good example of this. That's a perfect example of on-edge compute. Progressively, more and more, all of these AI agents that are getting created are going to be more personalized, are going to know more about you, are going to have more of your data. And if all of these inference steps, if all of these interactions with the model are leaving whatever device you're interacting on and going to some data center somewhere, and then coming back with the response, you're basically exposing a ton of your data. And the next step for us to continue to create agents that are more capable and more personalized, and actually, I mean, if you guys are fans of Avengers or Iron Man, actually have everybody have their own Jarvis, you actually need to be able to do inference, so actually serve models on edge devices, on phones, on simple laptops. And I think we're getting there very quickly. Some of the largest models, most capable models, can running like 1-2 computers in the same network connected together without ever having to leave your local area network. And that's extremely exciting. But I don't think a lot is going to change in the training side of the house because the compute requirements are still bizarre. And I don't think you get anything new from decentralized compute for training. Long answer, but if anybody wants to add anything there.
That was pretty good. Here? Okay. Is Mustajab here? So Mustajab's question, you wanna read it? Okay, I got you. All right. Mic close. Sorry. Okay, thank you. How can blockchain and Web3 technologies balance the principles of decentralization with the need for scalability, regulation, and mass adoption while still maintaining user privacy and data sovereignty in a rapidly evolving digital economy?
That's a mouthful for sure. Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, no, there's a lot going on here. How can blockchain and Web3 technologies balance the principles of decentralization with the need for scalability, regulation, and mass adoption while still maintaining user privacy and data sovereignty in a rapidly evolving digital economy?
Yeah, I guess each of us will probably take different pieces of this. I'll certainly let Sam handle the scalability of AI. I mean, obviously, decentralization has its pros and cons. As you know, it requires replication. There has to be redundancy in order for networks to be robust and resilient in these situations, which often is the trade-off against scalability, yes. There are many situations where that's not necessarily the case. One of them actually being video streaming. So the way that Napster worked back in the day are these like peer-to-peer streaming applications actually can help us scale faster and better than a centralized entity, because a centralized entity would have to have a single data center or a number of replicated data centers scattered geographically in order to distribute content. And historically, latency has always been very bad when let's say you're trying to stream a sports game or something that has to be timed exactly perfectly. Technology has gotten to a point where we've now been able to leverage creative mechanisms to have things replicated very, very rapidly between node operators, basically regular everyday people, in terms of getting video content distributed very rapidly. And the way that we do that really does require very tight, well-proven economic models. So compensation for everyone's participation in that network. And I think the same thing really holds true everywhere. It's coming up with the right economic incentive structure to be able to use the benefits of this technology, but leave behind some of the downsides. In terms of data sovereignty and things like that, I think that ultimately is paramount and one of the critical components of blockchain and why it's so important. And scalability for things like that, I guess is becoming less and less of an issue as like data storage costs are going effectively to zero, and the ability for us to replicate that data is going down. I guess another thing I would say is the intelligent usage of how we're doing AI models. Like Sam was just saying, the ability to compress these models down and push them out to the edge is getting better and better. So we're just coming up with more creative ways of using the resources that we have, from my perspective, and it allows us to lean into this decentralized nature, because scalability isn't becoming so much of an issue.
I mean, well, I guess for me, it's the whole data element of it, being able to choose how that data is used, but also if the data is anonymized or not. Like, I might feel differently about sharing my data if I know that it's going to, some sort of research study for some sort of disease and they need demographic information. I'm totally making that up, but that's one way where it's like having the ability to anonymize data if it's being used in aggregate. And I mean, I see these things all the time. It's like, oh, surveys show that like 42% of people think this. I'm like, well, no one ever asked me. Like, I don't know where they get their data. No one's ever asked me my opinion for a survey. So like, I think it could draw a lot more transparency to like what people actually think in that example, and also the protection element of like the ability to revoke that data. I think once people start to understand how powerful that can be as a consumer, that like you have the keys to the car, you're not being driven around anymore, then it's like getting your driver's license all over again.
One thing that I would say, so I used to work at Google doing crypto at Google, and it was a really interesting dynamic because if you think of crypto, you think anti-Google. So generally, we had to do a lot of thinking, very first principle thinking about how do we defend our position in this space, and how do we actually go out to the world and speak at really big venues and say, yeah, we should be here and we have a lot of value to add. And I actually love this question because one of the main things that we concluded, and that a lot of people in the industry and even beyond the industry don't really realize, is that when you talk about blockchain or Web3, decentralization is not the end goal. Decentralization is usually the means. The end goal is censorship resistance. The end goal is reliability, so systems that never go down, is ownership. And there's things that will continue to be centralized and should be centralized because otherwise probably they wouldn't get done. I mean, one of the best examples that we like to give when I was at Google is if decentralization is the maxi, then try to lay an underground sea cable for the internet to go across the Atlantic in a decentralized way. It's not going to happen. Or try to build a phone in a decentralized way. It's not going to happen. So decentralization matters at certain layers of the technological stack, and at those layers, you really need to have decentralized systems. And many of those layers are the economic system, so that the bank or the government doesn't take your assets away, your data, so that Google or Facebook or Microsoft doesn't just take your data and go and create massively powerful models and you never see your data again. And multiple other aspects that your identity really matters and should be decentralized. So really identifying those layers of the societal stack where decentralization is really important, because you need a system that is censorship resistance, owned by the user, and it's never going to go down. That's where decentralization really matters, and that's where you should really have zero compromises about decentralization. Anywhere else, centralization is a good thing in a general sense. again, the example of the internet, a phone, I mean, a building, all of those need some level of centralization to actually occur, and that's okay.
Answers. Yeah, great.
Let's thank our speakers and thank Wyatt, and congratulations on winning the badge. Send me email to j@austinforum.org and we'll connect you so that you can get your South by Southwest 2025 badge. Thank you guys very much. Who has the clicker? Thank you.